Cricket, the gentleman's game. While around for more than a century, it hasn't picked up much traction in the United States. Here at the Yankee Cricketer, I'm trying to change that. By breaking down the game, explaining it piece by piece, this South African American hopes to ignite a desire among my compatriots to begin to follow the second most popular sport on the planet. So that one day, even though you may not fully understand why two players would want to play a game for 5 days, you may at least begin to appreciate it. So we will break down the game, begin to understand the rules and strategy, and analyze current headlines as well as decade-old controversies. All of that and more coming up. Today on the Yankee Creator Podcast, episode 8, we will take a look at one of the greatest players to play the game, Sir Donald Bradman, a series that defined him and a series that changed the future of cricket and fielding and field placements as a whole, and we'll contrast that with the shift in baseball. So all of that and more coming up. So if you've been around cricket for any amount of time and you've heard people talk about the greats of the game, you may have heard names like Sachin Tendulkar or Mahendra Singh Dhoni in India, Ricky Ponting, in Australia, Jacques Kallis in South Africa, Brian Lara in the West Indies. But one name that will always stand head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to batsmen is the name Donald Bradman. And Sir Donald Bradman was an Australian cricketer for about 20 years in the late 20s to the late 40s, 1920s to 1940s. He captained the team for a time, and he was truly an extraordinary talent. You may have heard of him. The trivia about Donald Bradman is his batting average, his lifetime career batting average in Test cricket. Because they didn't have shorter formats of the game at that time, all you played was Test matches. His lifetime average was 99.94. He got out for a duck in his final innings, 0 runs, and it brought his average below 100. So that's a little bit of trivia. If you've heard of him, it may be in that context. But anyway, Sir Donald Bradman came into the Australian team in 1928, and people were expecting him to do great things, and he started off with a bang. He averaged almost 67 runs per innings in his first full season with Australia, and I don't think anyone really could have seen what happened next. So in the 1930 season, he averaged 139, scoring a top score of 334. And then in 1931-32, he averaged 201 runs per innings. He played 5 matches. He batted 5 times. He was not out once, which helped his average. He had a top score of 299 not out. He scored 400s in 5 times batting and averaged 201 runs. And so this led a lot of teams to look at him as this unsolvable riddle, this gargantuan of the game, nothing could stop him. And so coming into the 1932-33 season, England was preparing for a slate of matches against Australia, and they thought they had a strategy to take him out. So back in these days, padding and helmets were scant. There weren't really helmets at all, and bowling wasn't as fast as it is today. So it was, you didn't need the helmets as much. Bowling at people was seen as bad sportsmanship. Cricket has always been referred to as the gentleman's game. There's a lot of good etiquette and rules and unwritten rules and sportsmanlike conduct and things like that you're supposed to adhere to. Similar to baseball. Baseball has a lot of unwritten rules too. But cricket, it's always about being respectful and being sportsmanlike, and think about your typical British stereotype, and that's probably a good idea of where a lot of these rules came from. But anyway, going into this series, England said to themselves, well, we have an idea how we can stop Donald Bradman. And it was called, or it became known as bodyline. And this was going to be a strategy where they would just bowl at his body, at his leg side, and just stack the field on that side of the field. So they would just put a bunch of fielders kind of on the leg side, behind square, in front of square, everywhere. They would just bowl at his legs and hope that he clipped the ball up into the air and that they could take a catch. And if nothing else, he probably wasn't really good at playing on the leg side because, again, back in those days, bowling at someone was seen as unsportsmanlike. And so a lot of bowlers would just bowl to the offside and batsmen would hit to the offside. There wasn't the innovation that we see today where batsmen want to hit it to the leg side, so they'll run across their wickets and hit it to the leg side or anything like that. It was kind of seen as, in the game of cricket, you bowl it to the offside and I hit it to the offside, and that's kind of how we play. And England said, nope, we're going to switch this up. This guy averaged 201 runs last year. We're not going to let that happen against us. We're going to put it on his legs, at his body, all the time, and just stack the field on the leg side. And so learning about cricket and growing up playing cricket, I always thought it was fun that in cricket there was such a wide variety of fielding positions. I always thought baseball was kind of limited in its fielding positions. You couldn't really change it that much. Now, obviously, part of that is my lack of playing time in baseball. Obviously, shifting a fielder slightly over is a big deal and can make a big difference when the ball's coming so fast. Just a couple feet left or right does open up different gaps. But just in general, the field positions are the same, right? You have the same 9 positions, whereas in cricket you have 100 positions, and part of that is just you shift a guy like 3 meters one way and he's in a different position, and baseball hasn't really done that. They don't have deep extra left field or whatever, and so I guess they could have more positions if they did that. But anyway, I always found it interesting that there was kind of a lack of positions in baseball. And so when I heard about the shift, I was intrigued. I was like, oh, this seems innovative. Shifting fielders all to one side of the field because a hitter can't go to the opposite field, right? You put everyone over, you move third base to like shortstop or even to second base, and you just put everyone on the right side of the field for a left-handed hitter or on the left side of the field for a right-handed hitter, and you try and block them up and stop them from scoring runs, right? Because they can't actually hit it to the other side of the field. And then you just put the ball in the zone, or you just kind of put the ball inside a little bit, and what are they going to do? They have to hit it to that side of the field, and they can't beat the shift. The only way to really beat the shift is to bunt. And then some people say, well, bunting is bad sportsmanship. It's like, well, I thought bad sportsmanship was shifting. How is shifting bad sportsmanship, but bunting into the shift isn't? Like, to me, this just looks like innovation upon innovation. You innovate by putting the shift, I innovate by putting a bunt, and it looks good because it's like, well, now you're not going to shift on me if I can bunt and make it to first, right? And so to me, this was great, but a lot of people in baseball don't like it. They see it as moving away from the spirit of baseball, what baseball is supposed to look like. And it's supposed to look like we have these 9 field positions, and they shift a little bit, but not too much. And you pitch to me, and I hit it wherever I want, and wherever I think I can find a gap. And if I'm used to having a gap here, and then you fill it up, that's not fair. And in cricket, that's kind of the whole name of the game. You're all constantly shifting the field to close gaps, so that the batsman may forget that there's a fielder there as he's hitting the ball and get out. Like, that's the whole point. And so I always thought that was kind of funny that baseball, they couldn't even adapt enough to hit the ball the other way. And so they were going to have to ban the shift. And they actually have banned the shift coming up in the future. The shift is not going to be allowed, at least the the huge shift, right? The kind of overwhelming shift where they just move everyone over. You might be able to shift a few people over a little bit, but the that massive shift is not going to be allowed anymore. And I'm just like, oh man, these pansies in baseball, they can't even hit the ball the other way. They're getting paid millions of dollars to hit the ball, and they can't even hit it multiple ways. Whereas in cricket, we can hit the ball 360 and we're totally fine. But actually, looking at this series that England and Australia played in 1932-33, we see the exact same things being talked about in regards to this series. There were such tensions as a result of this bodyline tactic to put the ball on his legs, on his body. People thought it was dangerous, and they thought that it was not in the spirit of the game. This is not how cricket is supposed to be played. And there was such tension that even the governments started getting involved because cricket was such a big sport in both England and Australia. There was tensions between the two countries, and it was just a very contentious series. But did it work? Or did Sir Donald Bradman, the player who averaged 201 runs the series before the season before, was he able to overcome the bodyline tactic? Yes and no. He averaged his lowest average that he had in his entire career until that point. He picked up 350s to only 100, averaged 56.57, which is still a good average, really good average. He got 100. He was not out once, but the amount of runs that he scored in a season was never lower than 400, except for that season. He got 396, and after that season, he averaged over 90 pretty much every season until his final year in 1948. And so the tactic, you could say, did work because this series or this season looks like an anomaly on his stat sheet. So it looks like, yes, the tactic did work, but then it also spawned some changes in the game of cricket. After this series, they had to figure out a way to limit bodyline. No one was injured in the series. No one was hurt despite the lack of helmets and good padding and things like that. The bowling wasn't fast enough to really hurt anyone, and it wasn't really aimed at the head as much. It was kind of aimed, at the ribs and pads, just because people weren't as used to hitting on the leg side. And so they figured, well, if we put the ball on the legs, he's not used to hitting it that way. And we put a lot of fielders there, so he can't score any runs, and he might chip the ball up to us at some point and get out. And so it seemed to work, but then they decided, the cricket bodies decided that they were going to step in and that they were going to get rid of this leg theory bowling, this bodyline tactic. And so they decided, well, we'll change the rules, and they first started by trying to let the umpires judge it. And so they said, they first said that they should pass a resolution that bowling bodyline breaches the correct spirit of the game. But that didn't really work because people are going to do what they got to do to win regardless of the spirit of the game. So then they passed a law that said that direct attack bowling was unfair, and it became the responsibility of the umpires to identify and to stop it. But that didn't really work either in the mid-30s. And so eventually, in 1957, the laws were altered, and so essentially for 20 years, the umpires kind of just judged it and said, hey, you can't bowl there. But there weren't really any hard and fast rules about it. And then in 1957, the laws were changed that prevented more than two fielders from standing behind square on the leg side. And actually, this was intended to prevent negative bowling from spinners, right? The slow spin bowlers, they often have a lot of players clustered around the bat because the ball's spinning and bouncing, and sometimes the ball will hit the bat and pop up and you can get a catch. And so a lot of spinners were just aiming the ball right at the legs and hoping to get the ball to pop up, and they were stacking a lot of fielders on the leg side for the same reason as it was 25 years earlier in 1932. And they just want a wicket, and it's the best tactic available. And so they passed this resolution to prohibit negative bowling in that way. And an indirect byproduct of this was the fact that bodyline bowling now became not as useful. Eventually, in cricket, players got good at playing the ball on the leg side, and so it became part of the game. The bowlers now have the full range of bowling leg side, offside, wherever they want, and the fielders and the fielding team now have more of a responsibility to cover the whole field, right? You can't just stack fielders on the offside, because now you have to be aware that the batsman can hit the ball both ways. So the bodyline tactic, half of the benefit of it was the fact that batsmen didn't really know how to play on the leg side, and then the other half was we just jam it at the body and we put a lot of fielders there. So even if they do know how to hit it that way, they're not going to score many runs. And so with this law change in 1957, if you can't have more than two fielders behind square on the leg side, it kind of gets rid of that cover you would have, right? Because you could just bowl bouncers, but not full bouncers at the head, but kind of in the ribs, and put fielders behind square on the leg side, and it would be difficult to score. Although in today's game, I feel like batsmen would be able to adapt and be able to find a way. But anyway, this law got rid of that as a byproduct. And so it meant that that field was impossible to implement for bodyline bowling. And then later in the 70s, 80s, they changed the law that you can't bowl too many bouncers in an over. And so as bowling got faster, helmets obviously became a thing, and then face visors or grills became a thing on the front of helmets as bowling became faster, and they started bowling bouncers. So they limited the number of bouncers you could bowl, just because if you bowled 6 bouncers at someone's head, it becomes very difficult to score. And so they limited that. And so the way the game is now, you can bowl 2 bouncers in an over, and then everything after that is called a wide, and you have to re-bowl it. So anyway, that's kind of a history of the body line and why you can't have more than 2 fielders behind square on the leg side at the same time. And so it kind of does put into perspective my view of the shift. I always look down on baseball like, oh, you can't, just adapt to the game. Just adapt to the game. But in cricket, there have been multiple law changes passed in the last 50, 60 years that have limited not only where fielders can go, but also bouncers in general, where bowlers can bowl. And so, yeah, that's been an interesting development. In the last 20, 25 years, they've made a bunch of law changes that have come to benefit batsmen, so that batsmen can score more freely, because that's exciting and that's what brings in revenue and fans. But I think they've started rolling back some of those to give bowlers a chance. So I wonder if they'd ever roll back the bodyline rules just to see what would happen if you could bowl 6 bouncers in an over, and put more than 2 fielders behind square on the leg side. Would that just become a great tactic, or would batsmen get so good at just kind of flicking the ball over the wicketkeeper's head that wouldn't even be useful, because they already do that. Batsmen already hit the ball over the wicketkeeper's head, and they can hit the ball with their big bats for 6 pretty easily. And if you're going to bowl a bouncer and they know it's coming, it's probably going to go for 6. So I don't know. I don't know if they probably will never roll it back, but I think in today's day and age, the game has evolved to a point that batsmen are good enough that it wouldn't really matter. It would change the game for a little while until batsmen figured it out. But that being said, it is an interesting discussion to compare the shift and the bodyline field restrictions and the bodyline series, and see just how similar it is when you have a bat and ball sport, to be able to stack the field on one area, and if you can get a bowler to consistently put the ball there, or a pitcher to consistently put the ball in a spot where the hitter can only hit it to one spot, and then put all your fielders there, that's obviously the best tactic. And to see how it evolved both in cricket and in baseball just shows you that maybe the strategies aren't so different after all. So with that being said, we will talk about some news of the week. Cricket news from this week. We had some international action continuing with the result from the second test, Bangladesh versus Sri Lanka. And if we look at that one, we see that Sri Lanka picked up the win by 10 wickets. So in their fourth innings, they scored 29 and they didn't lose a wicket, and that was enough to surpass Bangladesh's score, and so they won by 10 wickets. Asitha Fernando picking up 10 wickets in the match for Sri Lanka. It started off well for Bangladesh, or relatively well. Mushfiqur Rahim not out 175 and Luton Das 141. Nobody else really contributing, so they finished with 365. And then Sri Lanka with Angela Matthews 145 not out, Shandamal 124 and 80 from Karunaratne put up 506 to take about a 140 run lead. And then in their second innings, Bangladesh could only manage 169 all out very quickly, and so just requiring 29 to win. Oshara Fernando, 21 runs off 9 balls. They went really aggressive and they picked it up and they won that match. So good result for Sri Lanka. And moving to women's cricket, the Women's T20 Challenge, just a quick follow-up to the other T20 tournament that was just played, the Fairbreak Invitational. This one just having 3 teams. We see the Supernovas and Velocity will be playing tomorrow for the final in Pune in India. So we'll be keeping our eye on that one too. A lot more Indian players in this tournament as it's taking place in India. Moving to the county championship, if we look at results from last week, the matches that we saw taking place, Hampshire beating Somerset by 10 wickets, requiring 1 run in their 4th innings to win, after Somerset crumbled to 69 in their 2nd innings. A lot of drawn matches, Kent and Northamptonshire and Warwickshire and Yorkshire both drawing those matches, but Essex winning by an innings and 56 runs over Lancashire with just a score of 391, so Lancashire crumbling there. And so as we look at the table, we see Hampshire on the back of that result moving up, Essex as well moving up, and we see Hampshire now catching Surrey because Surrey keeps getting draws, and so they're only 3 points behind, and Yorkshire and Lancashire not far behind either, within 15 to 18 points. Lancashire though on a run of draws and then the most recent loss, so they need to get it going, and Yorkshire just 5 straight draws as well. So the county championship kind of plagued by bad weather, slow pitches that have been difficult to score on, but also difficult to get players out, and so hopefully we'll start to see some more results as the summer wears on. And then finally, Indian Premier League, we're into the semifinals qualifiers stage of the tournament. We see Mumbai beating Delhi in the second to last match of the regular group play, which knocked Delhi out. If Delhi had won that match, they would have leapfrogged RCB into the 4th place spot, but they didn't manage that, and they lost by 5 wickets. They could only manage 159, and Mumbai, despite having a terrible season, was able to pick up that win. So then moving into the first qualifier, Gujarat and Rajasthan, the top 2 teams playing for a spot in the finals. Gujarat picking up the win there with 3 balls left. A good innings from David Miller to finish that one off. And RCB, playing against Lucknow, picked up a 14-run win to knock them out. And so RCB will play against Rajasthan, and the winner will play Gujarat in the final on Sunday. So be on the lookout for that final. It will be a good match. Gujarat actually just lost to RCB. RCB beat them by 8 wickets just about a week or just over a week ago. So if RCB is able to win this and kind of get that matchup, they'll be feeling confident, and definitely Gujarat will want to avenge that loss as well. So a lot of good cricket coming up, and more test matches should be on the way in the near future. More and more international teams are going overseas. England and New Zealand will be playing pretty soon, and so looking forward to that too. But that's all we got this week. I'll see you next time.